All right, so diving into our webinar for the day, what can Service Insights do for you? So the purpose of this and the vision here is to share some ways that Service Insights data can directly be applied within your programs, and you can make the most of the information that you're collecting. And so some of these are recommendations coming from our research team who have been looking at this data, who think about how you can use this data all the time. And some are coming directly from pantries who we've spoken to and worked with, both who have used Link to Feed and who have used Service Insights on Meal Connect. So it's really a crowdsourced list here, and I'll dive in. So thinking about the basics of Service Insights data, we're logging visits, and those visits are including both individuals in a household and the household. So using unduplicated numbers to communicate how many people your services reach can be a powerful way to use those counts to communicate. So for example, Radina at Harmony Cares, I have a little quote from her here, and she shared that they were able to apply for a grant and include the number of households they served in the last year, for example. And whether it's a year or a month that you serve, it can be helpful to have that exact count and have it quickly available. So number one is just purely the count of individuals. Number two, use those household numbers over time to advocate for resources to meet a changing need. So we all know that over time, the community that you serve at a pantry can shift. So whether you're seeing an increase or a decrease, it can be really helpful to have those records, again, of those unduplicated households over time, as well as duplicated visits. So I removed a slide here about the definition of unduplicated and duplicated because I was hoping to trim up this presentation, but it's probably worth mentioning that when I talk about unduplicated, I mean the actual people served. So if we're talking about 1 month unduplicated, maybe you served 50 households. And then if you're talking about duplicated or the visits, maybe half of those 50 households came twice. And so now you're talking about 75 visits, but it's still the same 50 households. So that number, whether you're using the visits or the unduplicated numbers, allowing that review over time can be a really powerful tool to share, for example, with one of your funders who might be convinced to increase their funding because of an increase in need in your community. Similarly, we can use trends over time to understand fluctuations in demand and order appropriate amounts of food. And this can be both within the year and then year over year as you have more years of data. So within the year, we might look at this example where I have June through March. And so as you can see for this particular pantry, they have a huge spike in December. And that's because they have an additional distribution. They plan for holiday events. They know that they are going to order more food for December. Another example might be you have seasonal workers or some other seasonal community that comes into your area during a certain time of year. Some parts of the state, that's the summer. And so you might see a spike in demand in that time of year. You might see more visits in that time of year. And how much that demand increases in 1 year can help you plan for the next. Generally, obviously nothing's perfect, but then year over year, as you have, let's look at 2023, let's compare 2024, we'll get to 2025, having those year over year comparisons, you can say, okay, generally, not just this year we saw a 25% increase, but generally over the past 3 years, we've seen a 20% increase. And so that again can help you just narrow in your predictions. 4, we have age distribution data from SIMC, and that is using those ages of both the head of household and additional family members to really get a sense of who is this food reaching? Not just who do you see at the pantry, but who does the food go to across that household? So you may see that there are many more children than you typically see in the pantry that you're actually reaching with the food that you offer, because maybe those children are in school during your service hours. So thinking about then what kinds of foods might be most helpful or most interesting to children. And then similarly, if you are able to see that you have a large population of seniors, thinking about what are some of the other ways you could support that community who are reaching out to your location for food. And then thinking about the household size, if it's a 1-person household versus a 7-person household, there's a huge discrepancy in the types of food or the sizes of food packages that those households can make use of. And again, this is something that you can see, you can experience right when those people are at the pantry, when you're speaking to someone, and you can also see it in the numbers in a way that allows you to take action. So if you know that you have this huge population of large families, it might be worthwhile in looking for larger packages of meat or other large size items, versus if you have a bunch of small families or seniors who live alone, having smaller packages of food and ordering more along those lines, or planning to break up large packages into smaller might be more helpful. All right, and then this one I really love, and this is a lens that I like to think about all the time when I look at data coming out of Service Insights on Meal Connect, and that is, what do I not see? So we can see in our examples here, we have a large number of people who are 18 to 49. We have many families who are 1 or 2 to 3 people in size. Who are we not seeing? And this applies to any of the pieces where you're looking at data from SIMC, asking that question of who is not visiting the pantry and why are we seeing this gap in this particular group? And some examples might be accessibility. If you're not seeing anyone with disabilities and you're asking about disabilities, maybe they can't get to the pantry for physical reasons. Or maybe it's something about the hours that they're unable to visit a pantry because it's only in the mornings and they work in the mornings. So thinking about who is it that we see and who is it that we don't see. All right, number 6. Use zip code data to advocate for resources from surrounding towns. So this is one that we have heard a lot of pantries have made use of, and that is being able to count up how many households are coming from different towns. Now, SIMC will make this beautiful map for you that shows the zip code, and so that can be helpful visually to see how far folks are coming, what that drive might be like, what the region is that you're serving overall. And if you want town data, Kendall created a beautiful spreadsheet that allows you to input your data and it will automatically create a list of the top towns served and how many households per town. So if that's what you're looking for, we've created kind of a translation tool to help you get that out of the information that you have access to, although SIMC does not do that automatically. So it's a little extra step, but can be really helpful if you want to go, say, to the next town over and share with them how many households you're seeing from their particular area. All right, number 7, using visits per household to inform decisions about distribution frequency. So how often is your pantry open and how often do people come in? And again, you know this kind of subjectively. If you're at the pantry often, you see the same people, you know if they come regularly or if they're kind of more now and then. But using the visits data in SIMC can help you bring all of that information together across all of your distribution days. So you'll be able to see the number of visits per household within a time period. So if you want to know, for example, in the last year, how many times have most households visited? Is that just once? Is it 12 times because you're open once a month? Or are they coming every single time that you are open? And similarly, this average visits per household can give you that sense. And so you're selecting a time period to look at. And then you can go from there and say, all right, if they're visiting every single time we're open, would it help if we were open more? Is there a greater need that we're not meeting? Or are there ways that we could cut back if we have volunteers, if we don't have enough volunteers for all our times, are there days that are less frequented, that we could really lean in on these other days and make sure that folks have what they need. So some of that information about how often do people visit a pantry can be a powerful tool. Next, use program enrollment data to identify additional ways to support your community. So I mentioned this a little bit when we looked at seniors, that there might be wraparound services that someone could use. Similarly, if you are asking about government program participation and you're noticing that people aren't accessing some of the local resources that are available, maybe there's a way you could bring in someone from another organization who could do a little info session one day that you're open and help connect people to those resources. Or could you have a flyer that's posted on the door for a phone number they could call to access another resource that they might not yet access? One example here is the SNAP program, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance, or food stamps. That is one that folks might need assistance applying, and could you partner with an organization that could help with that? All right, and then during our April data town hall, we heard another, a rather long list from some of the pantries who are active in SIMC of ways that they have already made use of this data that I wanted to add. So there's no fancy pictures here, but I will run through them quickly. Step one was using language data to apply for grants for translation services and open up partnerships with organizations that serve new Mainers. So this one was using the question that just asks, what is your preferred language? And so if you understand that, maybe 20% of the population that you're serving speaks Portuguese, that can be a helpful number to then go to someone who works with Portuguese speakers and say, hey, would anyone have a couple hours to volunteer and come help us out on these days? Or call me and say, we need more translated documents for SIMC that are in this particular language that we're seeing. Again, those numbers can be a way to communicate that need. Next, look at trends for emergency food calls to help make decisions about additional programs or distribution hours. So if you have a policy where if someone calls the pantry and says, I need food, and you make that available, if you're logging that visit on those days as an emergency visit, you'll be able to see what are those days that were most commonly opening up an extra time for someone. If you're regularly open on Wednesdays, but Thursdays you get about 3 calls a week, maybe that's telling you there would be an opportunity there to add a couple hours on a Thursday regularly to help those folks who can't make the Wednesday. Again, just having that information over time. Next, ordering the right types and quantities of foods using the dietary preferences question. So for example, if you start to ask about whether someone needs gluten-free foods, and you learn that 15% of your community would prefer gluten-free foods, but you're not currently providing any, that could be a helpful thing to know to then make a change that allows those folks to access the foods that they need. Gluten-free being one example, but if you're familiar with the dietary preferences question, there's a long list, including halal, vegetarian, vegan, food allergens that someone might be avoiding, many types of foods that can help make someone's experience even better at your pantry if they can access the food that they need. Next, give your fundraising, so I didn't finish this statement very well. Fundraising team is what that should say. Access to the unidentified reports so they can use the data for grants and sponsorships. So this came from a pantry that's a little bit larger. They have a separate grants team that works on some of their reports and fundraising. And so they don't need access to the intake part of SIMC, but they do want some of those reports to be able to pull them out and use them in different grants and reports to say, here's all the good work that we're doing, here's our need, and to really identify that and then also help someone else to visualize that. Lastly, this one we covered a little bit already, but sharing reports with a board or a town council. Having this data to then be able to communicate what you're doing at the pantry, especially if the folks on the board or the town council aren't very involved in your program, they may not know what you're doing, how many people you're serving, what those ages are, what languages are spoken in that community. All of that information can be helpful and can be put into a report. All right, and I will end this webinar portion with a quick note that we have our regular office hours on June 14th at 11. And then the next webinar in June will cover recruiting tech-savvy volunteers, and that's with one of our volunteer specialists from the food bank. All right, and I will stop the recording when I figure out